Welcome, everybody, to Kingdom in Context. I'm Sean. Tonight, we're going to be picking back up on our Kingdom Come series, Chapter 4, looking at the millennial temple. We're going to describe some of its dimensions, its purpose, its placement, all kinds of fun stuff, and why it matters for us as believers to know this kind of information. So I want to thank you guys for joining me here tonight. Let's get it. Thank you for joining me. We are looking at Kingdom Come series. We're looking at the Millennial Temple this episode. And I know it's been a long time coming. I appreciate everyone being patient with me, but this one took a lot of prep work. And so I'm glad we were able to get to it. And if you guys haven't already, you can subscribe to our socials down below. It's also in the video description, as well as if you want to check out our Kingdom in Context app. We're having a good time with it. People are finding fellowship on there. There is a fellowship finder. And it has also, that fellowship finder is being integrated and has been partially, is continuing to be integrated with Parable of the Vineyard fellowship finder as well. So there's even more. I think we have over like 1,400 people on there now. And so if you have someone in your area possibly that you'd like to fellowship with, we're trying to make that a reality for you. So we want to give a big shout out to Parable of the Vineyard, being willing to partner with us on that. And we hope to partner with other ministries as we continue to grow it and go. But if you haven't already downloaded the Kingdom in Context app, I think you're missing out. I think you should download it today. Links in the video description below for Google Play or the Apple Store, because you can actually get notified. YouTube doesn't notify everybody when we put out live videos or when we go live, so you can get notified directly through the app as well. You can look at our articles that we write throughout the week, as well as some announcements that we're doing, as well as look at other ministries that are connected with us in this way, that also have a heart for the kingdom of God and the gospel of the kingdom. So I just wanted to thank you guys for supporting us and all that you do. If you want early access to the study guide, we got some books coming out this month for that as well, as we complete that. And you can get that on our Patreon. Big shout out to all our Patreon supporters. All the slides that you guys see me review tonight for this presentation have already been uploaded to our Patreon. So if you're already a Patreon member, big shout out, big thank you for helping us keep doing what we're doing. If you're not, you can still go access the PDF of those slides and download them for your own study and use, because it's free, okay? So we really appreciate you guys, and I say we jump right into it. So let's look at the gospel of the kingdom of God pertaining to the kingdom come and his millennial temple. This is kind of a topic a lot of people like to argue and debate. I know the traditional argument from Judaism is that, this was a vision shown to Ezekiel to entice rebellious Israel to jealousy on what they could have had if they'd have been faithful instead of being scattered in the days of Ezekiel. But that's not the descriptions of the temple. That's not the promise earlier than Ezekiel chapter 40 and chapters 36 and 37, where Yahweh is promising Israel, when my sanctuary sits among you, the place where I put my feet, I'm going to be there forever, forever. So then we're going to see in these passages here in chapters 40 and 41, this is the sanctuary. Yahweh says that this will be the place where I put my feet and be amongst you forever. And we're going to see some unique differences between the Masoretic and the Septuagint, so stay tuned for that. because there's just a lot to dig into in this presentation. So let's jump into it now. Sorry, guys. Sorry, that was a mistake. 1 second. Let's try this again. All right, we're going to stop that. There we go. Okay. So this is chapter 4, the millennial temple. We're going to look at the sanctuary in the kingdom. Now, this is the kingdom that's come down to the earth. Okay, we're not talking about the multiple levels of the firmament and the different sanctuaries that are in each level and things like that. We've reviewed some of that in a show we do on Wednesday nights called Uncommon Ground on West Music's channel. So if you guys want interested in that, go check out West Music. It's one of the recommended channels below or on our channel link. And so, but tonight we're talking about the kingdom of God that's come down to the ground, the sanctuary being described inside of that. And Ezekiel 37, 25 through 28, it starts off telling us that they will live in the land of Jacob that I gave to my servant Jacob. They will live in the land that I gave to my servant Jacob, where your fathers lived. They will live there forever, and their children and grandchildren. And my servant David will be their prince forever. Now, the idea of they, that's faithful Israel, will live in the land I gave them to servant Jacob. That's going to be not only Jacob, but Isaac and Abraham. It's the same promise Abraham receives in Genesis 15 and Genesis 22 about he and his children and grandchildren will live in this land forever. And of course, that is those who are in covenant with Yahweh. So it's just not, you can't just be born by birth right into this. The surrounding context, which is a whole nother topic, a whole nother video, is those who are in, quote unquote, Jacob or in Israel, the family of Israel. You come into the commonwealth of Israel through faith and belief, through, this is, you can't just have someone that hates God and is going to be forced to live in this land forever. Okay. So these are going to be people that will participate in the first resurrection because Jacob's dead, David's dead. Now, this particular moniker here for my servant David, that refers to the king of Israel. And this was very common in ancient times where you would have the greatest king of that nation would be revered as the general moniker for that position, that authority. So instead of calling him the president, you would say that's the Nebuchadnezzar, or that's the Artaxerxes, or that's the David, right? And so we understand that according to Psalm 16 and Acts 2, that David himself personally, he's in Sheol, he's waiting the resurrection like everybody else. He's not the one that was prophesied in Psalm 110, 1 through 4, that's being called my Lord by Yahweh, that's going to rule forever in a Melchizedek priesthood. It's the Messiah, the Son of God, that's promised the priesthood to be ruling forever in a Melchizedek fashion, who is the prince over Israel. So this is the moniker usage of the term my servant David, very common in ancient kingdoms. Okay? He goes on to say, I'll make a covenant of peace with them, and it'll be an everlasting covenant. I'll establish them and multiply them. I will set my sanctuary among them forever. Full stop. I will set my sanctuary among them forever. It's never going away. It's not showing up for just 1,000 years, and then suddenly Satan's taken over, and it's never here again. You can't find it anymore. It's never going away. It's going to be here. It's going to be here forever. He goes, my dwelling place will be with them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. And then the nations will know, so we got another qualifier, the nations will know when his sanctuary is here. The nations will know that Yahweh sanctify Israel when my sanctuary is among them forever. So direct qualifiers in the context of this passage. We go into Jubilees chapter 1, 22 through 24. It's repeated slightly differently, but the same promise given to Moses on Mount Sinai. It says in verse 22, after this, they will turn to me in all uprightness. That means in the right behavior. I am with all their heart and with all their soul, I will circumcise the foreskin of their heart and the foreskin of the heart of their seed. That's an allusion back to them turning to him in uprightness, because that's the promise of the covenant. At the resurrection, you get the heart of God put into your heart, right? You'll never sin again. You'll do what's right. And it says, I will create in them a Holy Spirit, and I will cleanse them so that they shall not turn away from me from that day into eternity. Their souls will cleave to me in all my commandments, and they will fulfill my commandments. Sounds a lot like Deuteronomy 30, doesn't it? Verses 1 through 10. I will be their father, they will be my children. Hallelujah and amen, right? And they all shall be called children of the living God. And every angel and every spirit shall know, yes, they will know that these are my children, and that I am their father in uprightness and in righteousness, and that I love them. It's a beautiful passage. In this moment here, he's expressing to them, look, this will be this amazing moment. You'll be sanctified in the sight of the nations. And you're going to have the heart of God put inside of you with a new body. Even the angels will respect you. They're going to know exactly your standing, your place. and you will never, ever question whether God loves you or not. You will know it fully inside and out because you'll have not just a deposit anymore. You have that full Spirit of God inside of your newly recreated, resurrected body. He goes on in Jubilees 1:25-27 to say, "And I write down for yourself all these words which I declare to you on this mountain, the first and the last, which shall come to pass in all the divisions of the days, and in the law, and in the testimony, and in the weeks, and in the jubilees, unto eternity." Here's the caveat: until I descend and dwell with them throughout eternity. How long is he going to be here once he descends? Forever. And this is Yahweh speaking. This isn't just the Son. This is the Father and the Son are coming down together. He said to the angels of the presence, "Write for Moses, from the beginning of the creation till my sanctuary has been built among them for all eternity, and the Lord will appear to the eyes of all, and all will know that I am the God of Israel and the Father of all the children of Jacob, the King on Mount Zion for all eternity, and Zion and Jerusalem shall be set apart." They should be holy. So we're going to be reading about how and some of the descriptions of being set apart tonight within the New Jerusalem that comes down. This is a wonderful depiction I found that some artist created in his idea of what this beautiful concept of the kingdom of God inside the New Jerusalem, looking at the Ezekiel's temple with the river coming out of it. So within the 1,500 square miles, we zoom in, the camera zooms in. Think of an aerial view like in movies you've seen, right? You see all the landmass, you see like the entire country of France or whatever, and it starts zooming in. So now you've zoomed in to the tallest mountain inside the New Jerusalem, and you zoom into the top of one of the slopes of that mountain, you see this amazing structure, which is what we're going to read about in Ezekiel 40, with the river of life coming out of it. And I want you to pay attention to that river of life. Do not forget that that's there. We're going to talk about it at the end tonight, because that's very important. It's an important qualifier to know this is not just some imaginary temple that Yahweh teased the Israelites with because they were rebellious, and he was just being petty with them and saying, "Oh yeah, well, had you been obedient, here's everything I'd have done for you." No. The consistent promise since Moses, since Abraham, since Enoch, this massive house of righteousness described and repeated in Testament of Levi chapter 10 as the words of the Enoch introduced to mankind, a massive house of righteousness will be coming down. It'll be called Jerusalem, and within it is massive land, beautiful rivers, trees, large bodies of water, mountain slopes, structures layered throughout. Obviously, the houses of the saints, the mansions that Yeshua referenced in John 14. And tonight we're going to zoom in on this specific temple where the river of life is coming out of it. So this is another artist's depiction of what this temple might possibly look like. The reason why I love this one so much is because you can see it's actually on a seemingly flat surface with mountains around it and behind it. Given the illusion of the actual description, we're going to talk about the description Ezekiel 40 because it's between the Masoretic and the Septuagint. It kind of gives you this feel of, okay, well, it's definitely on top of a mountain. It's not at the basin of a mountain or in the valley. It's on top. Whether it's actually on a southern slope or just at the very top, that's the difference between the two texts. But ultimately, it's on the largest mountain, and this is consistent with 1 Enoch 25. It's on the largest mountain within the garden, within the New Jerusalem that returns. So Ezekiel chapter 40, 1-4, it says, "And in the 20th year of our exile," one second, guys. I'll put this here so you guys can read it. "Within the 20th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year, after Jerusalem had been struck down, on that very day the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he took me there. In visions of God, he took me to the land of Israel." So this is a vision. There's not a physical geographical place that was in existence in Ezekiel's day. He's seen a vision of what's to come. In a vision of God, he took me to the land of Israel and set me on a high mountain on whose southern slope was a structure that resembled a city. So he took me there, and I saw a man whose appearance was like bronze. He was standing in the gateway with a linen cord and a measuring rod in his hand. "Son of man," he said to me, "look with your eyes, hear with your ears, pay attention to everything I'm going to show you, for that is why you've been brought here. Report to the house of Israel everything you see." Now we're gonna go through this. We're actually going to watch a video at the end of this, so I want to encourage you. We're going to watch a video at the end of these presentation where I go through verse by verse in some of these chapters. It doesn't cover every single verse in these first 3 chapters of Ezekiel, but it covers a lot of them as you get a full layout. And what these pictures I'm showing you is an engineer's rendering for what he thinks this structure looks like, and all these descriptions given in these 3-4 chapters. An engineer has come through and made a 3D animated model. We're going to watch a video of that later after I review the verses, so stick with us. Hit the thumbs up if you haven't already, guys. We really appreciate you. I think we got quite a few people in the live chat, 127 in the live chat, and we've only got 29 thumbs up. So we need a lot more. We need a lot more Elijah bald heads in thumbs up category. hit those Elijah heads, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Helps us get the word out. Helps us in the algorithms. And also be sure to drop a comment after this video is over. But let's take a look at this real quick. Ezekiel chapter 40, verse 5, it goes on to explain a little deeper into this description of the temple. I saw a wall surrounding the temple area. Now the length of the measuring rod in the man's hand was 6 long cubits, each measuring a cubit in handbreadth. And he measured the wall to be 1 rod thick and 1 rod high. Now, as you can see, guys, the engineering's rendition, this 3D animation we're looking at in the picture, the engineer has put these cubit measurements into feet to help us, in our Western measurements. So I really appreciated that. Verse 6, then he came to the gate facing east and climbed its steps. He measured the threshold of the gate to be 1 rod deep. Okay, that's pretty cool. So there's an east gate. Verse 7, each gate chamber was 1 rod long and 1 rod wide, and there were 5 cubits between the gate chambers. The inner threshold of the gate by the portico facing inward was 1 rod deep. So we see inside this gate, inside this east gate, you open the doors and you go inside, and there's a hallway, and there's these little cubicle areas inside, left and right of this hallway, where these are the gates, the gate chamber. This is pretty interesting, showing you how big they are. Then he measured the portico of the gateway inside. Okay, so that's, I guess, the length between the doorway and the hallway. It was 8 cubits deep, and its jambs were 2 cubits thick, and the portico of the gateway faced the temple. Okay, so he's just giving you a full layout. These are engineering specs, but I think they're beautifully put together. And I don't agree with all of them. I'm going to explain towards the end of this. This is why you definitely want to stick with us and watch the entire thing, because towards the end of this, he's going to talk about the holy area and then the most holy area. And there's actually some pretty unique discrepancies between the Masoretic and the Septuagint. So not only with the throne room, but the room outside of the throne room and the way it's designed, the entrance ways, the amount of altars that are there. So this artist and this engineer has put this 3D animation based off of the Masoretic text. So stick with us as we get deeper into this. I'll show you the differences that I put together for you. Verse 10, he says, this is like looking from the ceiling down inside this east gateway. There were 3 gate chambers on each side of the east gate, each with the same measurements, and the gateposts on either side also had the same measurements. He measured the width of the gateway entrance to be 10 cubits, and its length was 13 cubits. All right, so it's a nice big broad hallway entranceway in this east gate. And in front of each gate chamber was a wall 1 cubit high, and the gate chambers were 6 cubits square. All right, cool. So we're seeing like these little cubicles where the guards are. They have I guess a little ledge. Maybe this is your coat check. I don't know. This is your garment check or something. I don't know, your tunic check. It's very interesting. Now we're looking kind of an aerial view of this gate from looks like the inside. It says, then he measured the gateway from the roof of one gate chamber to the roof of the opposite one. The distance was 25 cubits from doorway to doorway. So this is a large, wide structure. You can see the water flowing out of the city, going towards the east. Verse 14, he says, next he measured the gateposts to be 60 cubits high. The gateway extended around to the gatepost of the courtyard. So this is fascinating. And the distance from the entrance of the gateway to the far end of its inner portico was 50 cubits. So, all right, it's interesting. So it's a lengthy section. I thought this was fascinating here in verse 16, talking about the narrowing frames of the windows. And I don't know if the artist did this appropriately or not, but it's an interesting depiction from his. Just keep in mind, I want to be very upfront about this, guys, that this is an engineer's depiction in a 3D rendering. Doesn't mean he translated all this properly, but I thought it was, wonderfully done as far as a good guess of what all these descriptions put together could possibly look like for these chapters. So just, it is what it is. It's the best animation I could ever find. The gate chambers and their side pillars had beveled windows all around the inside of the gateway. The porticos also had windows all around on the inside. Each side pillar was decorated with palm trees. So here's a little bit example of what I'm talking about. Like, I don't know. So this is the windows on the outside, but like when you were inside a few minutes ago, it doesn't look like the windows are letting a lot of light in. So I'm not sure what the deal is there, because I would figure they would, like those little slits are beveled, their edges are beveled, but the window itself is very, very thin and narrow. It doesn't have to be like that. They could be, I don't know. I just don't know if that's his idea. That's fine, but I would have made the windows much larger. A lot more natural light would have been coming in there, in my opinion. Verse 17, then he brought me into the outer court, and there were chambers and a pavement laid out all around the court. So this is beautiful. Here's the outer court, and I want you to take careful notice as we go to verse 17. 30 chambers faced the pavement. Guys, this is amazing right here. This is truly amazing to me. 30 chambers faced the pavement. What are those chambers for? I'll give you guys a minute. Put it in the live chat or put it in the comments if you're watching this later. Before we answer, tell me, what do you think those 30 chambers that wrap around this temple, what are they for? What would you think they're for? I'm going to take a quick drink while you guys answer. All right, someone in the live chat is saying they're for storage. What do we think these large things are? Someone else is thinking dwelling places. Someone else thinks it's a calendar count. Someone else thinks it's for the priests. Someone else is suggesting it's for animals. Someone else is saying they're hotels, people to sleep in. Well, guys, I'll put it back on screen here. This is for, sorry. This is, I don't know why it keeps doing that. They are for dining rooms, as you see on the writing on the interior of the image. They're for dining rooms. So why do you need that many dining rooms? What are you doing there? You're eating. So it's possible that the portico area, the guards at the portico inside that first gate, they're actually retrieving the sacrifice you brought with you. Yeah, you're bringing your own groceries to the barbecue. Yeah, it's BYOB. Bring your own bovine, or bring your own lamb. It's a lot of places to eat, right? There's even more that we're going to get to, but these are the outer court places to eat. Who's eating in the outer courts? The people, the nations. We're going to look at the priests' cafeteria area, and there's even a place for the singers, but which are also a version of priests that may not do the sacrifices, but they're considered priests that minister in the temple. But these outer courts, as you can see, this is on the outer court area. This is where the people would come. So suddenly, does this not make the Torah a little more relevant now? All the people of the nations, they're going to have to come inside the city. What does it say? Revelation chapter 2, 2-5. Come, let us go up to the house of the Lord, the tallest, the chief of the mountains. The people will have to know Torah so they can be clean and journey to the temple to have their fellowship meal, their covenant meal with Yahweh. This is why you need an entire resurrected, millions and millions of resurrected saints to help these people learn Torah, to teach them how they can literally walk close to their Creator and have a covenant fellowship meal with Him. Let's keep going. Verse 18. When flanked the gateways and corresponded to the length of the gates, this was the lower pavement. So it's just telling you how much pavement basically is around these dining halls. It's a large facility. I saw someone else at a different point do different measurements, and they were trying to say the length and width of this thing was like an 80-story building, to put it in very modern terms. Verse 19, sorry guys, I don't know why it's doing that. Verse 19 says, then he measured the distance from the front of the lower gateway to the outside of the inner court. It was 100 cubits on each side. on the east side as well as the north. So you see now there's an inner courtyard and their relationship to the three great gates, the north, south, and east gate. Ezekiel 40:20 through 22 says he also measured the length and width of the gateway of the outer court facing north. It's 3 gate chambers on each side. Its side pillars, its portico, all the same measurements as the first gate, 50 cubits long, 25 cubits wide. Its windows, portico, and palm trees had the same measurements as those as the gate facing east. 7 steps led up to it. 7 steps, huh? 7 steps led up to it with its portico opposite them. It's very interesting. There was a gate to the inner court facing the north gate, just as there was on the east. He measured the distance from the gateway to the gateway to be 100 cubits. So now you're getting not just the measurement of the outer court, but also from gate to gate, there's 100 cubits. Verse 24 through 27, then he led me to the south side. I saw a gateway facing south. He measured its side pillars and portico. They had the same measurements as the others. Both the gateway and its portico had windows all around. Like the other windows, it was 50 cubits long, 25 cubits high. 7 steps led up to it. Its portico was opposite them. It had palm trees on its side pillars, 1 on each side. The inner court also had a gate facing south. He measured the difference between the gate to gate toward the south to be 100 cubits also. Hey guys, quick question. Why are palm trees, put it in the live chat, why are palm trees on these gates? Any ideas from the live chat? Anyone that may have seen our Honor of Kings series where we reveal the significance of palm trees? Palm trees, 146 watching, and looks like 151 watching and 85 likes. Let's see if we can get 150 likes before the show's over. All right, GeoTruth is asking if the palm trees mean healing. And then Zealot Critic got it. It's the tree of life, guys. The tree of life, palm trees. So they have unique properties. These are what's described in the book of 1st Enoch, consistent with Ezekiel's vision as well, for anyone that might be interested in why that specific tree, why the palm tree, why not an aspen, why not an oak, why not a birch, why not a fir. It's specifically, this supposedly was the tree of life that produced a special type of fruit from this palm tree that was so enticing to Adam and Eve. Very fragrant and aromatic, and supposedly there's a lot of research done on the leaves of palm trees and how they are they can be used for medicinal properties. So I don't think it's any wonder that we see that the trees of life growing along the river of life, their leaves are used for the healing of the nations. Very interesting. So let's keep going here. And verse 32 through 34, he brought me to the inner gate on the east court. He measured the gateway. It had the same measurements as the others. Its gate chambers, side pillars, portico had the same measurements as the others. Both the gateway and its portico had windows all around. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its portico faced the outer court, and its side pillars were decorated with palm trees on each side. 8 steps led up to it. So this is interesting, guys. 7 steps led up to the north and south gate, but the east gate, it says there's 8 steps that led up to it. It's very fascinating. I don't know. It's very fascinating. Verse 35 through 37, then he brought me to the north gate. Oh, okay. So it's 8. So these are the 8 steps. So these 8 steps are leading up to the gate, the inner gates, not the outer gates of the inner courtyard. So the inner courtyard gates have 8 steps. The outer courtyard gates have 7 steps. There it is. Then he brought me to the north gate and measured it. It had the same measurements as the others, as did its gate chambers, its side pillars, and portico. It also had windows all around. It was 50 cubits long, 25 cubits wide. Its portico faced the outer court, and its side pillars were decorated with palm trees on each side. 8 steps led up to it. There was a chamber with a doorway by the portico, in each of the inner gateways. There, the burnt offerings was to be washed. Wait, what did they say? What did you say? Burnt offerings, how dare they? How dare you, Ezekiel? The burnt offerings was to be washed, specifically in this dining room by the side pillars. So, you brought your animal, maybe the gate chamber guard, which is a priest, receives your animal as you come in. You're going to go to your dining hall. He's going to take it over here and take care of it. to the inner gate area and take care of it and slaughter it for you. So as far as I know, as far as I understand the Torah, the average person that just brought it, they're going to go to their dining room hall because they can't come into the inner area, the inner gate. This is for the priesthood. So how appropriate. You have an entire room next to these inner gates where you would take and wash the offering that's brought forward so that it can be clean. Verse 39, inside the portico of the gateway were two tables on each side on which the burnt offerings, the sin offerings, and the guilt offerings were to be slaughtered. So there they are. On the inside of these inner gates, you have the slaughtering tables that the priesthood would use to properly quarter the animal. Verse 40 through 41, outside, as one goes up the entrance to the north gate, there were 2 tables on one side and 2 more tables on the other side of the gate's portico. So there were 4 tables inside the gateway and 4 outside, 8 tables in all on which the sacrifices were to be slaughtered. So if you had a lot of people coming up, now you've got all types inside and out. I wonder why that is. Some are covered, some are open to be seen by everybody. I wonder why that is. Does anyone know? Does anyone have any ideas why some of them might be inside the gateway, slightly hidden, if you will, maybe only visible through the windows on the side of the gates of these buildings, whereas these other 4 slaughtering tables are in the outer courtyard to be seen by everybody? So if you guys know, let us know in the live chat why some may be a little more private than others. I don't know. Verse 42 says, there were also 4 tables of dressed stone for the burnt offering, each a cubit and a half long, a cubit and a half wide, a cubit high. On these were placed the utensils used for slaughtering the burnt offerings and other sacrifices. So this is interesting. Someone's guessing the difference between some of the altars being inside and outside the gateway was because of their witness to the people. Some are lesser and the greater. They're suggesting it's for hierarchy or for the priests or different types of offerings. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if anyone's ever found a specific verse that mentions this, but yeah, I don't know. We also see that this was the length of the cubits for these specific dressed stone altars for the burnt offering that had the utensils on them to make sure they're properly slaughtered. Verse 43, the double-pronged hooks, each a handbreadth long, were fastened all around the inside of the room, and the flesh of the offering was to be placed on the tables. So I'm guessing the double-pronged hooks, that's where you're going to grab, move the animal around as you slaughter it as you need to. 44 through 46, outside the inner gate was within the inner court were 2 chambers, one beside the north gate facing south and another beside the south gate facing north. Then the man said to me, the chamber that faces south is for the priests who keep charge of the temple, and the chamber that faces north is for the priests who keep charge of the altar. Okay, so it's like entirely different groups of priests just for the altar versus the rest of the temple building. These are the sons of Zadok, the only Levites who may approach the Lord to minister before him. Verse 47, next he measured the court. It was square, 100 cubits long and 100 cubits wide, and the altar was in front of the temple. Then he brought me to the portico of the temple and measured the side pillars of the portico to be 5 cubits on each side. The width of the gateway was 14 cubits, and its side walls were 3 cubits on either side. So this is interesting. Big foyer before you get into the actual temple. The portico was 20 cubits wide, 12 cubits deep. The 10 steps led up to it. There were columns by the side pillars, 1 on each side. Then the man brought me into the outer sanctuary and measured the side pillars to be 6 cubits wide on each side. Okay. The width of the entrance was 10 cubits, and the sides of the entrances were 5 cubits on each side. It's a big door, guys. It's a big door. So we go inside the door now, and we're inside the interior temple. This is Ezekiel chapter 41 now, verse 2. He also measured the length of the outer sanctuary to be 40 cubits and the width to be 20 cubits. Verse 3, he went into the inner sanctuary and measured the side pillars at the entrance to be 2 cubits wide. The entrance was 6 cubits wide. The walls on each side were 7 cubits wide. There you go. Very interesting depictions here. Verse 4, then he measured the room adjacent to the inner sanctuary to be 20 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and he said to me, this is the most holy place, 20 by 20. Next he measured the wall of the temple to be 6 cubits thick, and the width of each side room around the temple was 4 cubits. This is verse 5, and clearly we're outside of the temple now, and we're doing an aerial view of this. Thank you so much. Big shout out to Carolyn. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that. Yes, the people that didn't get resurrected from all the nations that survived the day of the Lord, they're the ones coming to the temple. They're the ones that will be bringing their offerings forward. They'll still be sinning, so they still need atonement for their offerings. That's why they need an active temple and a priesthood. And the Father's going to bring the process that's happening in heaven on their behalf. He's going to bring that process down to the earth so they can see it happening. And so it's going to increase their faith. It's going to teach them about the goodness of God. And it's going to be it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So here we have, next he measured the wall of the temple to be 6 cubits thick, and the width of each room around the temple was 4 cubits. Right. So now we're getting to the priestly chambers around the room, which to my understanding, this is where they go and would change their clothes after they do certain things. Ezekiel 44 goes into this in more depth as far as why they change their clothes. They don't want to transmit holiness to the people. So because they're going to go out of this inner court to the outer court area where all those chamber rooms were, where people are eating. It's big cafeteria halls, right? So people want to come up to the priest and talk to them. So they got to change their clothes after they go into the most holy or the holy place or the inner temple, because they don't want to transmit the holiness of God to people who are still in the mortal flesh who may not be able to handle it. If I can explain it like that. This, in my understanding, this is what caused plague to break out in the camp in the Israelite wilderness and in the temple in the ancient Israelite days, was because someone that doesn't prepare their body to be clean and they step before God's power of His presence, your body loses that encounter and plague breaks out on you, right? Because you didn't show up properly prepared. Verse 6, the side rooms were arranged one above another in 3 levels of 30 rooms each. There were ledges all around the wall of the temple to serve as supports for the side rooms, so that the supports would not be fastened into the wall of the temple itself. So it's interesting. It's kind of like trying to explain there's an exterior support lattice for these rooms outside of the interior sanctuary. Interesting design. Verse 7. The side rooms surrounding the temple widened at each successive level because the structure surrounding the temple ascended by stages, corresponding to the narrowing of the temple walls as it rose upward, and so a straight way went up to the lowest story to the highest through the middle one. And this actually sounds very much like the spiral ascending stairway that we read about from the fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls in part 3 of this very same series, Kingdom Come. So we just had these fragments we read, those little QA fragments we read, descriptions of pathways and spiral stairways inside the gateways and different things like that. So it's very interesting. I don't know if it was talking about the same structure or not, because we just had little short fragments we were reading from. We didn't get the full context from those. But check out part 3 of this series. The video, the link for that video is in the bottom of this video description if you want to see parts 1, 2, and 3 of the series after we're done here. Verse 8, I saw that the temple had a raised ball all around it, forming the foundation of the side rooms. It was the full length of a rod, 6 long cubits. All right, then. The outer wall of the side rooms was 5 cubits thick, the open area between the side rooms of the temple. Verse 10, the outer chambers was 20 cubits wide all around the temple. So what it's describing is this walkway between the temple itself and this, what looks like a staircase. It looks like bleachers on the right, but these are actually buildings, and they're outer chambers. So it's going to explain those chambers here in a little bit. Verse 11, the side rooms opened into this area with one entrance on the north and another on the south. The open area was 5 cubits wide all around. Now the building that faced the temple courtyard on the west was 70 cubits wide, and the wall of the building was 5 cubits thick all around, with a length of 90 cubits. So this is something I thought was interesting that I don't know. I didn't see this in Ezekiel, and you guys can tell me if I missed it, but this artist depiction that we're looking at, all these buildings have a roof. Just think about this for a minute. Humor me. I don't know if these buildings are going to have a roof. I can't remember a specific verse in here when I was reading it that said, and the roof of it was made of this or that. And in fact, it didn't even tell you the substance of material from which all these buildings and these structures are made. They could be made of crystalline, glowing with fire or something. I mean, who knows, man? Like, and I just don't remember it saying that. It's describing the dimensions of the building, but it doesn't, I don't remember it saying that they all had roofs. So that could be interesting, where if they were just very open. It's still considered a building. It's a walled off area, but it just could be open, because I don't think you're going to get inclement weather in the mountain of God, a place where there's no need for the sun or moon, a place where it's perfect, the paradise of God. Something tells me you're not going to get inclement weather. Verse 13 through 15, then he measured the temple to be 100 cubits long, and the temple courtyard, and the building with its walls were also 100 cubits long. The width of the temple courtyard on the east, including the front of the temple, was 100 cubits. Next he measured the length of the building facing the temple courtyard at the rear of the temple, including its galleries on each side. It was also 100 cubits. The outer sanctuary, the inner sanctuary, and the porticos facing the courts. These are very detailed descriptions of the entire layout. And while I'm going to express here in a minute some of the disagreements I might have with this particular engineer's 3D animated depiction, I want to compliment him for taking the time to do this. I mean, this is amazing. Gives you something to look at, something very visual. I think it was a labor of love, and just praise God for him being willing to try and do this. So this definitely took a lot of thought. Ezekiel 41:16 says, as well as the thresholds and the beveled windows and the galleries all around with their 3 levels opposite to the threshold were overlaid with wood on all sides. They were paneled from the ground to the window, and the windows were covered. So now we're getting some specific artistic design about how the windows, were covered, and how they had little lattice panels on the inside. And so I think that's interesting. 17 through 18 looks like it's taking us back inside to the temple. And it says, in the space above the outside of the entrance to the inner sanctuary on all the walls, spaced evenly around the inner and outer sanctuary, were alternating carved cherubim and palm trees. Each cherub had 2 faces. Okay. So what's interesting here is I'm going to go over this particular verse in a minute towards the end of this presentation, because the Septuagint actually describes the 2 faces. This just mentions 2 faces, but it doesn't tell you that one of the faces was a lion. So it's like a man on one side and a lion on the other. So it's interesting. Very similar to these beasts that we see depicted in the heavenly temple above that guard the throne of Yahweh, depicted both in Revelation, Ezekiel chapter 1, and also the Apocalypse of Abraham. (21 through 22), he says, the outer sanctuary had a rectangular door frame. The door frame of the sanctuary was similar. There was an altar of wood 3 cubits high and 2 cubits square. Its corner base and the sides were of wood. And the man told me, this is the table that is before the Lord. Now, I'm actually going to talk about this as well, because he places this. It says the outer sanctuary had a rectangular door frame. The door frame of the sanctuary was similar. There was an altar of wood 3 cubits high. This particular whole passage in the Septuagint describes something slightly different. And we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. And the placement of this altar, it's not right there in the Septuagint, it's somewhere else, which to me makes a lot more sense. But either way, if you guys have watched this channel for some time, you know that we constantly talk about the differences between the Masoretic and Septuagint, the history of how we got the Masoretic, the history of the Septuagint being older by 1,100 years as a core translation. But even within that 1,100 years, around the 1st century AD, the Pharisees commissioned to have new translations of the Septuagint made because they didn't like the original one. Mostly because of some verses we'll cover later, as far as why would they not like a translation of Ezekiel, one of their prophets? Well, the same reason they stoned and killed a lot of their prophets, because they didn't actually follow Yahweh. They just wanted to make up their own narrative. So, just keep this in mind. Here's another little spot where, again, this artist is doing the best he can with his depiction, but when we compare the 2 texts, you're like, clearly this artist did this depiction based on the Masoretic and didn't cross-reference with the Septuagint. So Now we're in chapter 42 of Ezekiel, verse 1. Then the man led me out northward into the outer court, and he brought me to the group of chambers opposite the temple courtyard and the outer wall on the north side. And those looks like bleachers, those three levels of outer chambers that are facing each other. This is what's depicted in the red there. The building with the door facing north was 100 cubits long and 50 cubits wide. Verse 3, the gallery faced gallery in three levels, opposite the 20 cubits that belonged to the inner court and opposite the pavement that belonged to the outer court. Okay. So it's trying to give you a depiction there. In front of the chambers was an inner walkway 10 cubits wide and 100 cubits long. Their doors were on the north. Okay, interesting. Little hallway, little alleyway between those buildings. Now the upper chambers were smaller because the galleries took more space from the chambers on the lower and middle floors of the building. For they were arranged in 3 stories, and unlike the courts, they had no pillars. So the upper chambers were set back further than the lower and middle chambers. Okay, cool. So I wonder if there's an interior elevator or if there's a way on the outside to ascend. I'm guessing maybe an interior, maybe a ascending spiral staircase or something. I'm not sure. Doesn't show us that much detail. Verse 7 through 9 says, the outer wall in front of the chambers was 50 cubits long and ran parallel to the chambers and the outer court. For the chambers on the outer court were 50 cubits long, while those facing the temple were 100 cubits long. And below these chambers was the entrance on the east side as one enters them from the outer court. Okay. Just telling you, a whole different layout. Little interior, little city here for the priests to do what they got to do without interacting with the people, but also without going into the holy place of the Father. Verse 11 through 12 says, on the south side, the length of the wall of the outer court were chambers adjoining the courtyard and opposite the building with the passageway in front of them, just like the chambers that were on the north. They had the same length and width, with similar exits and dimensions. And corresponding to the doors of the chambers they were facing south, there was a door in front of the walkway that was parallel to the wall extending eastward. Very interesting. Very symmetrical. Then the man said to me, the north and south chambers facing the temple courtyard are the holy chambers where the priests who approach the Lord will eat the most holy offerings. So these are actually dining rooms, guys. Just take a minute, take all this in here. These are dining rooms. So these large chambers on each side of the temple. So we have the regular people. They have the 30 large dining rooms around the exterior of the temple. But the priests themselves have these unique 3-tiered leveled cascading dining rooms. And I'm guessing it's because there's a hierarchy of priests. So you would go get your food from the sacrifice that's prepared. Because remember, you're just making a meal to Yahweh. You're not wasting the animals. God made things. God made animals that are for food and some that are not for food. So the ones he made for food, they use in this process to make a meal with Yahweh. Then the priests take their portion of that meal and they go back to their dining room to eat it. Very interesting, huh? 15 through 17 says, now when the man had finished measuring the interior of the temple area, he led me out by the gate that faced east, and he measured the area all around. With the measuring rod, he measured the east side to be 500 cubits long. He measured the north side to be 500 cubits long. So that's 5,100 feet. That's almost a mile, isn't it? Isn't it 5280 is a mile, guys? Let me know in the chat. Yeah, someone's asking where are the bathrooms. It's there's a lot of details in here that are not explained. This is even though this is fairly detailed, there's a lot of details that are not explained. So yeah, you start to wonder, okay, well, is there plumbing here? Is there people that is the food so amazing that you just don't have to go until you get back down the mountain? Or somewhere down the mountain, is there like, some holy porta-johns? Would they have to call them something different than porta-johns, considering like John the Baptist and John the Disciple and all these guys be resurrected, and they'll be like, yeah, maybe they'll call them something other than going to the John. Yeah, it's 5280 is a mile, so we're looking at potentially like almost 4 miles squared here as far as the size of this wall outside. It had a wall all around it. So it's fascinating to me. 18 to 20 says, he measured the south side to be 500 cubits long. He came around and measured the west side, and it was 500 cubits long. So he measured the area on all four sides and had a wall all around it, 500 cubits long, 500 cubits wide, to separate the holy from the common. Isn't that fascinating, huh? All right, so we're going to actually look at this clip real quick. Give me 1 second here. Let's look at this clip. This is everything that this has got some extra stuff in it, so keep that in mind. It's got some extra depictions in this animation. He also, the person who made this also doesn't understand the idea of the ophanim, and he still thinks it's like circles with eyes all inside of it. So we've tried to break that down in our morning cup of context called Ezekiel's Wheels, where I show from the text from Enoch and Ezekiel that it's, what has been mistranslated as wheels with eyes is actually just the glow and the gleam of these ophanim characters, these actual class of angels called ophanim, next to the cherubim and the seraphim. And it's not this weird steampunk looking sphere with eyes all around it. But this guy doesn't know that, so he's depicted that when he touches on Ezekiel 43, some of the descriptions there. So, but he's going to go over with a wonderful little 3D animation, taking you through everything we just looked at with still images. He's going to go through it in a little video, and it's going to show you chapters 40 through 43 in a unique way. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. All right, guys. So that little part we just saw right there with the glory of God's coming from the east from Ezekiel 43. This is the part where, like I said, I don't agree with him using the Masoretic and that really poor interpretation of making the Ophanim these big circular wheels with eyes in them. That's not technically what I don't think that's how the Hebrew words should be, or even the Greek Septuagint words should be rendered, because it makes it to be something unlike anything we've ever seen in Yahweh's descriptions, and it ignores the Ophanim, who are described as the ones who carry the throne of God as a mobile throne in Ezekiel 1 and 8 and 10, and Enoch 71 and some other places. It's the Ophanim class of these angels that turn and have radiance just emanating from them, who literally are holding up this flat firmament material on which the throne of God sits. So they're like holding it, because you remember, like the priests, the Levite priests, they had to make the little fittings put the poles through them so they could carry the Ark of the Covenant as well as the bronze altar. So this is the equivalent of the angelic priesthood holding, literally, remember, the Ark of the Covenant, that was the seat of Yahweh. So this is an idea, like, forget the stupid circular things with eyes in them, but think of like actual glorified, amazing angels literally flying down and holding up the flat, see-through, crystalline firmament that Yahweh's throne's sitting on top of. And he then comes over to this the top of the temple to say, good job, guys. You made me the best meal ever. I love it. It's exactly what I wanted. It's what I told you how to do it. You did everything perfectly. All my statutes, ordinances, commandments, you followed them. And here I am, presents to spill out on everybody. Have a good time. But imagine being at this place and going through the proper motions, because you're diligently taught by the priesthood know how to do this. And you've already went inside the mountain of God, and here he comes with his angelic carriers pulling his throne down from the heavens. So again, while this particular depiction, I don't agree with the little circular wheels in the eyes. I think those are actually Ophanim angels from the Hebrew and the Greek. What a beautiful thought, that you're already on this beautiful mountaintop in this beautiful temple having a wonderful meal, and here comes the Father. Could be interesting. Or here comes the Father and the Son. You know what I mean? Just, it could be amazing. Absolutely amazing. So this is the actual altar that I'm going to be breaking down in a minute from where he's pulling this Ezekiel 43 passage. And in the way it's described in the Septuagint, we're going to show some of the differences and why I think that it's not, I don't know if it's talking about, I don't know if he put this in the right place. Let me just put it like that. And I don't know if it's talking about this particular altar or some other ones, but we'll see. It's hard to tell between the two translations, and because of the way the Septuagint describes this altar in proportion to the thrones of God. So I think it's the Masoretic, you don't even have a clue. So it's possible that's why I put it here instead of where I'm going to explain here in a minute. Someone asked a few minutes ago in the chat, they were saying, wait a minute, with this, are you saying that like animals are going to be losing their blood? Yes. Animals are not promised eternal life, fellow believers. This is something that I think that we really need to take a hold of and grasp in our faith, to understand the Creator in his wisdom decided he's going to make certain animals for food. And yes, even he and the angels eat food. The same types of food that he described on earth, they participate in heaven. It's in all types of prophecies. The sacrifices of God will be ate in heaven. Lambs are brought forth, cattle, sheep are brought forth for Passover to be eaten. Oh, by the way, how interesting that the very beginning of Ezekiel and this whole thing we're looking at, it said that he got this vision in the first month on the 10th day. So what happens for all of you guys that study the scriptures and the feasts? What significance is the first month on the calendar and the 10th day specifically? Tell me in the live chat if you know, or put a comment in this video if you're watching later. What is significant about the 10th day of the first month on the biblical calendar? I'll give it just a minute so we can see. Okay, so Tenstetter is saying the selection of the Passover lamb. So that was the day you set aside the appropriate lamb, waited 4 days until you slaughtered it. I don't know what that means. Thought it was interesting. I don't think, Ezekiel's in the river Kibar. It means he's in captivity across the Euphrates in Babylon, and when he was having this vision. But I don't know what that means. Clearly it's a significant day. Just like the 10th day of the 7th month is significant for the Day of Atonement. And he was getting this entire vision of all this on the 10th day, the day that the Passover was selected. And I don't know if I'm not trying to infer too much, but I think that's not a coincidence at all, in my opinion, especially because we're about to read about this passage right here. Now, I didn't make slides for this with the verses. This particular 3D animation, they're just putting the verses in the top left-hand corner. I didn't make slides for this because I'm going to go over some of these verses in a minute, but these specifically are for altar sacrifices, for burnt offerings. This little lip at the very bottom, that's to catch the blood that would drain down. And I don't know if there's an internal plumbing of some sort underneath this altar that's built. I don't know. As you can see at the bottom left-hand side here, you see the actual water flowing out from the temple. I personally don't think that his depiction of the water flowing out is going to be like this. You're not going to just have to step over a creek running through the temple. In my opinion, it's probably going to have its own drainage that comes through the base and then comes out. I could be wrong, but just there's a little bit of interpretation put into this 3D animation because he's dealing with as much as he can as far as the descriptions. But this altar, like I said, I don't know if it's in the right place. And I don't know. It's very interesting. So anyway, we're going to read about it in just a minute. It's almost over. All right, so that was it. So let's look at Ezekiel 43:11. As we say, they shall bear their punishment for all the things they've done. And this is the part that a lot of people from Judaism or anti-missionaries will bring up to talk about this particular passage. And they'll say, well, no, this whole temple you're seeing being described in Ezekiel 40 through 48 was just a what-if scenario. It was just if you hadn't have been, they claim it's like a massive guilt trip by the Father to just rub it in the noses of the rebellious Israel to be and the faithful priests that got the faithful remnant that got taken in exile because of the rebelliousness of everybody else. It's like God's just rubbing it in their face. Be like, oh, you could have had this amazing temple and been in all this glory and had a good time with the presence of the Lord showing up, but no. That's the epitome of guilt. No, these dudes this is a promise for the kingdom to come. Remember, the sanctuary that descends and stays forever. I can't stress this word forever enough. I don't know why in so many of these theological topics, people struggle so much with this term forever. They really do. They struggle. And then when you have all the qualifiers that talk about it being forever, they struggle putting them together. It's just, May Abba increase all of our faith, is what I would pray. So here in 43:11, this is the famous passage that is debated. And I'm trying to let you know, if you look, we're going to look at the Masoretic and the Septuagint, because in my opinion, the Septuagint makes it perfectly clear. So it says in the Masoretic, they shall bear their punishment for all the things they've done. They shall describe the house, its entrances, and the plan thereof, and all its ordinances, and you shall make known to them all the regulations of it, and describe them before them. And they shall keep all my commandments, all my ordinances, and do them. So people will say, so see, no, look, he's just talking about like, you shall tell them what to do, and then about the temple, that's the commandments and ordinances he's talking about. And I'm sitting there going, that's not the point of the covenant. That's not the point of them being able to be in the house, this house that's described, and doing it properly, because it blends into the rest of the Torah. The Septuagint says, if they are ashamed of all they've done, then make known to them the design of the temple, its arrangement and its exits and entrances, its whole design along with all of its statutes, forms, and laws. Write it down in their sight so that they may keep its complete design and all its statutes and may carry them out. So we got to... Oh, you know what? I'm so sorry, guys. I think I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. I made a mistake because I just recognized that as I'm reading it. I think these are actually flip-flopped. I apologize. One second here. You guys see me make mistakes from time to time. This is one of those times probably, because this doesn't look right to me. This is, this also should let you know that I actually read the text. So I'm not taking notes from somebody else. So the Septuagint says, okay, I apologize. So the first slide should have the Septuagint out beside it. This is the Septuagint. The second slide is them trying to make the case that they should look at all the statutes of the house and carry them out, only speaking of the temple. But the first slide lets you know, this is the actual word in the Septuagint, even though I messed up with the parentheses, that this is, all of it's pertaining to the Torah. So this is why they're being punished for the things they've done, because they transgressed the Torah. And he's saying, look, your priesthood, your temple's destroyed, your priesthood scattered. All these things that in the days of Ezekiel, these punishments that came upon them that was prophesied, was because the people stopped doing the Torah. They stopped abiding by its commandments and ordinances and not doing them properly. So he's saying, in a positive sense, write down this vision, show them what's going to be, and they shall keep all my commandments and ordinances and do them. Because that's how you get to this fulfillment, is you continue back in the covenant, you repent, and you continue back in the covenant and start doing what's right again. So anyway, I'm sorry I messed that up a little bit with my typo, but that's the general idea. Now, this is the Septuagint in Ezekiel 43:14. It says something that you cannot find in the Masoretic. And it says, from the bottom of the commandments of the hollow part to this great mercy seat from beneath was 2 cubits, and the breadth was a cubit. And from the little mercy seat to the great mercy seat was 4 cubits, and the breadth was a cubit. So we've talked about this before on our channel. There's no other functionary word that I've ever seen for the Greek and the Hebrew. This is called the propitiatory in the Greek as well in some translations. It's also called the mercy seat in generic translations. In the Greek, it's called the hyposterion, is the great mercy seat. And the Greek for the small mercy seat is called the mikros. So there is a distinguishment even in the Greek, which is where the Septuagint was translated into the English. And this is in the same context of that altar that was being described outside of this room earlier. That's why I said I think that placement of that large altar outside of this may not be right. And specifically, this room is designed differently in the Septuagint, or supposedly the way it seems to be reading, it's a different design. This little wooden altar right here shouldn't be in the middle of this doorway. And I'm going to explain that in just a minute as well. But from what I can understand, this particular room here that was shown to us earlier should actually have 2 mercy seats in it, a big one and a small one. And I put them in the reflection of the gold so you can see what they may look like at the back of the room, since we can't turn the camera around from this 3D animation. See that? From the Septuagint's description, it seems as if there is in the most holy place, the throne room, this would be where the big mercy seat and the small mercy seat would be, which is the seats of the Ark of the Covenant, where they would sit on the lids that contain the covenants inside them. So they'd be right there in the reflection of the gold on the walls. So this would be the little mercy seat and the great mercy seat. And this is if you go to Blue Letter Bible, Ezekiel 43:14, you'll see the hyposterion, and then also the micros when it refers to the little and big mercy seats. This room outside of the most holy place, but this larger room here, is not described in the same way in the Septuagint either, according to this 3D animation we showed. I wanted to show you guys the 3D animation so that you can get some visuals, right, to get an idea. But unfortunately, when I started looking at the comparison of the two texts, whomever made that animation only looked at the Masoretic, and there's some differences. So in this room here, it has two entrances, and there are two, French doors, or two what's called leaf doors, and instead of four. The Septuagint describes this room to have four entrances. There's only one altar in this room instead of four, as described in the Septuagint. And the faces of the lions are missing on the artwork on the walls. So if you go and you can try to do your own studies if you like, compare Ezekiel 41:15-26 and Ezekiel 43:13-17 between the Septuagint and the Masoretic. And again, I'm not an engineer, but there's clearly some things missing here as far as entrances and the way these altars are supposed to be set up, these altars made of wood. So it's very interesting. If we go to Ezekiel 47:1, both in the Septuagint and in the Masoretic, we see that this entire temple layout, and this is kind of an aerial view here, and I think it's fascinating to me because it's like, it's almost the way these gates are set up. It's almost like a cross. It's very fascinating. It's almost like a person with his arms outstretched. But you see the river of life running out from the temple, and this particular artist depiction has it running through the courtyard. So I guess there's little bridges to walk over it, or you can just step over it, or I'm not sure, but it's even got it running through the inner and the outer courtyard. And you've got the water flowing out and down the temple, because remember, this is on the top of a mountain. As Ezekiel 40:1 says, in the Masoretic, it's on a southern slope on a very high mountain. The Septuagint says it's just on a very high mountain, and that was on it as it were the frame of the city before me. So very similar in depiction here. 1 Enoch 25:3 said, he answered me, saying, this high mountain which you've seen, whose summit is like the throne of God, is his throne, where the Holy Great One, the Lord of glory, the eternal King, will sit when he shall come down to visit the earth with goodness. So this is consistent with 1 Enoch as well. The temple's on the top of the mountain. And yeah, it's interesting. It's a big temple. Massive. Almost a mile on each side. That's massive, guys. That's big. I prefer, instead of being on a barren temple with no grass and no trees and everything, I love this depiction better. I would prefer that it's actually on top of a beautiful, lush, amazing temple that's the river coming out of it and refreshing everything from that river as it comes out of it from the glory and the power of God. God's like the ultimate water purifier machine. You know, he's like the ultimate ionizer for water, like the most heavenly Kangen machine ever. That water just comes out from him and it goes does amazing things for the world even after it leaves the New Jerusalem. So here, Ezekiel 47:2-3, the angel actually takes Ezekiel in this vision and he takes him to this river. And he's like, yeah, you can step in this river. Check it out. He goes, next he brought me out through the north gate and led me around the outside of the outer gate facing east, where I saw the water trickling out from the south side. As the man went eastward with the measuring line in his hand, he measured off 1,000 cubits and let me walk and let me through ankle-deep water. So remember what we talked about earlier, 500 cubits was almost a mile. So 1,000 cubits is what, like 1.85 miles? So this is a long, long way. Then he measured off another 1,000 cubits and led me through knee-deep water. So for another almost 2 miles, it slowly gets deeper and deeper in this river. And again, he measured 1,000 cubits and led me through waist-deep water. So it's getting deeper and deeper as he's going now like 6-7 miles away from the temple. Once again, he measured off 1,000 cubits, but now it was a river that I could not cross because the water had risen and was deep enough for swimming, a river that could not be crossed on foot. So now he's going to the deep end of the river as it's going and becoming fuller and larger. This is amazing. I don't know how that happens, specifically from a small trickle, but that's what it says. So I don't know if there's other tributaries underground that are forming to these different layers of depth that cause it to get deeper. Ezekiel 47, 6 through 11 then goes on to explain the benefits of this river of life. He says, "Son of man, do you see this?" he asked. Then he led me back to the bank of the river where I arrived. I saw a great number of trees along both banks of the river, and he said to me, "This water flows out to the eastern region and goes down into the Arabah. When it empties into the sea, the water there becomes fresh. Wherever the river flows, there will be swarms of living creatures and a great number of fish because it flows there and makes the waters fresh. So wherever the rivers flow, everything will flourish. Fishermen will stand by the shore from En-Gedi to En-Galaim." Guys, this is near the Dead Sea. So in modern-day Israel, these words for these land locations, that's in the Dead Sea area. So now we've gone far south of Jerusalem. So again, that whole area, like we've tried to explain in part 2 of this series, the length and breadth and width of the New Jerusalem and all the land territory it's going to actually cover. Or maybe it was in part 3, I think. Either way, so basically this is giving you a qualifier here. This is going down towards the coastlines of the Dead Sea, which makes perfect sense. Look at the next sentence. "They will spread their nets to catch fish of many kind, like the fish of the great sea, but the swamps and marshes will not become fresh. They will be left for salt." So how amazing is this, right? Because what is the covenant that is required for all that work we just saw in the temple? All those priests, all those meals being prepared, all of it is to be salted. All of those meals prepared are to be salted with salt according to God's laws and instructions, his Torah. That's why it's sometimes generically referred to as a covenant of salt. He's literally leaving a place for you to gather a ton of salt. It's fascinating to me. You don't have to go dig it up. You're going to have salt. Ezekiel 47:12, "Along both banks of the river, fruit trees of all kinds will grow. Their leaves will not wither, their fruit will not fail. Each month they will bear fruit, because the water from the sanctuary flows to them. Their fruit will be used for food, and their leaves for healing." Who's going to need healing after the first resurrection and the kingdom descends to earth? It's not those who got resurrected. They've already been perfected. It's the nations of the earth. So this is why when people say over and over, they email us, they write us, they make comments on our social media posts as well as our videos, and they'll say, "This is all wrong. The New Jerusalem's coming down at the end of the millennial reign." And I'm like, guys, just look at the details for 2 seconds. The entire city is designed to interact with the nations. It's at the beginning. It's literally what saves them. It has food, water, and healing for them. So it's got the ultimate welfare that people want the state to provide for them in communist ideas and socialist ideas. This does it properly. You have to act right, practice the behavior of the Father, and it'll always ensure that you got food, water, and medicine. So it's the city itself, as well as the temple, is designed to interact with the nations. And if you need healing, you're part of the nations, well, you've got the leaves of the tree of life that grow along the river of life are going to be for you. And this is consistent with Revelation 22, 1 through 2. So people will say, yeah, but that was Ezekiel's temple. That was just a vision. That wasn't real. That was just a scenario. Revelation 21 says it comes down after millennial reign because Revelation 21 already went through the millennial reign. I'm like, guys, none of the books of the prophets are chronological. Some chapters go through a certain time period of chronology, then it stops, and then it starts at somewhere else and retells more details from a different perspective. Like this is very common, not just in Revelation, but in Matthew, Jesus does it. In Luke, Jesus does it. Isaiah, Zechariah, Nahum, Amos, all these different places. Like there's, Joel, the book of Joel, like it's not always chronological. Ezekiel and Isaiah are notorious for this. Jeremiah does it as well too. It's not always chronological. You just have to look at the qualifiers. Well, the qualifiers, look at the top. The angel showed me a river of water of life as clear as crystal flowing from the throne of God and from the Lamb. What did we just read in Ezekiel 43:14 in the Septuagint? A temple where there's 2 mercy seats. Those are thrones of God and of the Lamb. And out from under that is this river of life. Down the middle of the main street of the city, it's coming out. So it's coming down the mountain out of this specific temple, and it's going to do what? Go into another city. This is what I try to tell people, just hopefully bring people to some mentality of thinking. This is why we did our video called From the Kingdom to the Garden, or Kingdom of the Garden, excuse me, where I talked about how there are structures described inside the Garden of Eden before it was removed from the earth and taken up into heaven. And this is what's coming down again as the New Jerusalem. There's going to be more structures, more cities, concepts than just this temple that we looked at. We just, remember what I said at the very beginning, aerial view, camera pans, and we're zooming in to look at one structure. 1,500 miles of land, and we're looking at one four square mile structure. Like that is, there's this river that we saw flowing down from the top of the very high mountain. It's going to water everything from it on the earth and inside the New Jerusalem. It's going to make things fresh and nice. So therefore, you're going to have other places of abodes, other places of interaction inside the New Jerusalem, to where this river of life flows through the middle of that city, whatever that looks like. I don't see any description of that in the scriptures. I see mountains and trees and rivers and all kinds of things, but here's a place where it says flowing through the middle of the city. I don't believe it's talking about the temple we just looked at, but I could be wrong. Either way, it has the same qualifiers. 2 thrones, the Lamb of God and the Lamb. Excuse me, the throne of God and the Lamb, 2 thrones. Just like it says in the previous chapter, in chapter 21, verse 22, there's no more Holy of Holies because that room is now filled with the Father and the Son. The Almighty God and the Lamb. So there's 2 seats. Just like Yeshua tells us in Revelation 2, 25 through 27, he overcame and he sat on his Father's throne with him just as we can overcome and we can sit on Yeshua's throne with him, that place of authority. So here we see, and not just the big arching idea of what is authority and who has it, but now we see literally 2 seats. Prophesied in Ezekiel, in the Septuagint translation, that the Pharisees did not like and made up their own Masorite translation. They did not like 2 thrones in the temple of God, because that clearly tells you there's always a son intended. They did not like that. So they make a new translation. And then that's what's been mostly used for Bible reproduction throughout the centuries, since the 9th century AD. So, with that said, Revelation matches the same energy. You got 2 thrones, you got the trees bearing 12 kinds of fruit each month. So that's a new crop each month, 12 different crops per year, just like Ezekiel said. And just like Ezekiel said, the leaves of these trees are for the healing of the nations. How amazing. How wonderful. We were just reading about a furthering description in Ezekiel of the actual sanctuary of God that he promises will come down to the earth, as well as the river of life that runs out of it and flows down into all the water tributaries for the rest of the water source inside the New Jerusalem. Just amazing. Truly amazing. So, let me see here. That's our presentation for tonight, guys. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I'll do like 10 minutes of questions if you have any. But ultimately, it's a beautiful blessing and a promise. We've got an amazing kingdom coming our way. This is the whole promise of the Bible. This is Matthew 24:14. Yeshua tells us the gospel of the kingdom is what Yeshua preached. And he says, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached to all nations, and then the end will come. As a witness, as a testimony to all nations. It doesn't mean they're going to believe it, but at least they're going to hear it. So I don't think there's any coincidence that the biblical cosmological conversation has suddenly surfaced with a passion in the past 7 years. And churches and believers are talking about it in droves. Because in order to have everything we've been describing, you have to have the biblical cosmological description of creation. You cannot have what the world tells us about a heliocentric evolutionary model. So if we believe our Messiah is truthful, we believe that God is his Father and he's truthful and does not lie, then we know what he described to us is where we live, where he lives above us, and what he's bringing down to us. It's a beautiful depiction. It's so beautiful. So we got a question asking about what's your opinion on when it says going to or from the east in the Bible? Is it talking about going to or away from? I don't know what GOT is. I don't know what the last year question is. Yeah, I apologize, brother. You have to expound on your question. I don't get your question. Thank you guys for your super chats earlier. I really appreciate that. It's a blessing. And thank you everyone, as always, for your Patreon support. If you want these slides, like I said at the beginning of the show, they're for free at our Patreon wall. That link is in the video description. As well as, have you downloaded the Kingdom in Context app yet? You should download it. All right, I don't see a lot of questions coming in. Check my phone just in case my software is not working well. Yeah, Karen C. brought up a good thing that I forgot to touch on when we were looking at those slides a minute ago. Let me actually get back to that slide real quick because that's something to consider, right? Check this out. So remember this slide? In Ezekiel 47:4, the angel says, hey, you can walk in this water. You know, we're going to go like almost 2 miles at a time, and it's going to get deeper and deeper. What do you got to do in the Torah before you go to the temple of the house of God? You got to bathe. You got to baptize yourself. That's a part of you outwardly showing your repentant heart inwardly, and it's the physical necessity for a mortal person to wash themselves. Can you wash yourself in water that's too deep, that you have to swim in? You can, but it's not the same. It's a risk of drowning, right? But not if you can just get up waist deep, knee deep, ankle deep. You can gently, easily go baptize yourself, go wash yourself in the water of life. Get ready to go into the temple to have your amazing meal with the Father for Sabbath, new moons, all the feast days, Passover, Shavuot, Pentecost, Day of Atonement, whatever. The river of life, in my opinion, the reason why it is at these incremental levels is so people can easily baptize themselves before they present themselves to Yahweh, which is a part of the Torah. They have to come present themselves to the priests at the temple of Yahweh so they can make sure they're clean and ready to participate in the awesome meal with their God. It's truly beautiful in my opinion. All right, so someone, let me see here. Got a couple more questions here real quick. Someone's asking, why are there steps going up to the altar? I thought that was forbidden. Why are there steps going up to the altar? I thought that was forbidden. I don't know. There's also, how do I say this? There's lots of details in this particular one that's not in, there's extra details in the one described in the tabernacle, like the boiling sea and other things. But there's also the hewn stone, what was called dressed stone, which is where they had the utensils for the slaughtering of the animal, whereas an outside altar, and this is my understanding, is that the outside altar is different. So the altar that's done outside of his house that you can just make of unhewn stone with a rampway was a little different because you're not going into the presence where his power and glory sits. You're making an altar out to him and he's not there. Maybe an angel shows up to validate your sacrifice, but that's not the place where he resides. So in that, you don't want potentially someone exposing their nakedness because they're not ready to present themselves to Yahweh walking up that altar, which is why you need the ramp versus steps in the altar within the temple. And so that's my understanding. As well as the steps, let me go back to this real quick. I don't think the steps were actually described for the actual altar, but steps going into the gateways. So that also may be a caveat to consider. Let me go back to this real quick. Ezekiel, what was it, 42? 43. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, it's in verse 17. Oh, let me check this real quick. But it's a great question. There's small differences in this one compared to the one that's talked about in Exodus. Yeah, see, that's where I have the question about the discrepancy in those passages, verse 13 through 17, the Septuagint, and how it's completely connecting the mercy seats closely to this altar of sacrifice. And I'm not sure if it's like a hibachi, basically. Like they're sitting there, and then the priests come up and prepare their meals right in front of them, and then they eat it. So it's very unique. I gotta admit there was some little differences in here that I'm like, all right, well this is fascinating. There's no boiling sea, like I talked about. Either that's missing or that's not a part of this description for people to boil some of their sacrifices if they need to. I didn't see any ovens. And I don't know if they're just using earthenware that they put on top of the altar on the grill itself. So yeah, there's, again, limited descriptions in this thing, but there's a lot of things, not like the plumbing, the system, where do people use the restroom, all kinds of different things like that. There's a lot of stuff not mentioned in here. These are very quick summations, even though it seems like a lot when you start putting it together. But I agree with you. There's some things that I'm trying to work out myself. It's very fascinating. Signe Tulipon is asking what the square buildings around the temple complex. I don't know if that was from earlier or not, but if you go back earlier in the video, those are all the dining halls for the people that come and eat outside the outer court. They come eat the meals that were just prepared for them from the sacrifice they brought. Mortal people will have children in New Jerusalem. The resurrected saints will not, because they'll not marry. And someone's asking about the building on the west wall that's used, and that's another thing that I don't know. It didn't explain in those chapters that I can remember, and the gentleman with the animation didn't cover it either. So I don't know why I put that in there, to be honest, because again, like I said in the Septuagint, that inner room says it was 4 entrance ways. And so I'm sitting there going, does that mean there's one out the back of the holy place, which would go out to the back of the temple, and there's never any west gate mentioned of any kind? And I don't know. So I don't know exactly what that means, and I don't know what that building was back there either. I didn't see him describe it in that 3D animation breakdown. So I apologize, guys. I don't have every single detail. Just trying to go with what information we had. Okay. Thanks, Rich P. I really appreciate that, brother. Thanks for the super chat. We get this question often, so we're getting it again right now. Can someone baptize yourself, or do you need authority over them? Now, remember, not to cleanse yourself to get ready to go to the temple of God, according to the Torah. I mean, that's not. You don't technically need someone there to validate like that you dipped yourself in water. You just, once you're clean and washed up, then you need to validate yourself to the priest. You need to show him that you are clean. Might be good if he sees it, but something tells me the way that this design was that they can literally see the river of life flowing down eastward, down the mountain, so they can see if you've washed yourself or not. And if you think about the way mountains work, either this is a massive slope that goes for hundreds of miles, or at some point this river of life turns into a waterfall and gets further down. So it doesn't tell us all the descending topography of this mountain, this great, very high mountain, but it could be an amazing waterfall inside the New Jerusalem from the river of life. But ultimately, as this thing turns into a larger stream, a larger river, and it trickles out from underneath the east side of the city, or of this complex, this temple, then you can go and wash yourself, and the priests are just up there at the edge of the temple, probably seeing, okay, all these people are washing themselves, and they come up here. But ultimately, if you're talking about like a baptism for conversion of faith, and that's your sign that that you're putting your faith in Christ and all that stuff, we always suggest you have an elder with you or someone in the faith that you look up to and respect to maybe be there with you, just to kind of signify with you. You technically don't need that either. The Bible doesn't prescribe that. I'm just saying if you want to go with the tradition. But in the Torah, you just had to make sure you were clean. Otherwise, you might break out in plague. So you can either have a witness to it, or you can just make sure you've done it properly, because you don't want to break out in plague. Mr. Bear is asking about the sea in Revelation 21, verse 2 or 3. There's no more sea. That's talking about the perspective of John, where he's looking up and he sees the city coming down, the firmament's being rolled back. And remember, there's a sea above the firmament that's hanging right now. This is what's told to us in the Testament of Levi, chapter 2, and it's also in Genesis chapter 1 through 8. Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. It is the water that was separated from the firmament. The other half of the water went down below and receded, and the dry land appeared, and then there's still water above the firmament. So that's going to go away. And this is just a theory, but it's based off something I read in a Septuagint version of Jeremiah 31, or excuse me, Jeremiah 33. And there's this unique phrase in there. It talks about even if the sky was raised. So if the firmament rolls open so the New Jerusalem can descend, and there used to be a covering of shomayim, which is what the Hebrew word means, a covering of water that's left over from day one of creation, then that is no more, and the quote-unquote sky is raised, that water could be vaporized. 2 Peter 3:10, the elements of the aeronaus is melted with fervent heat, and then that becomes the needed air pressure for us to have a higher sky that's raised. It's a theory, but there's something going to happen when we have a refashioned firmament with that new piece of earth coming down, which is the New Jerusalem. And hopefully that also answers someone else's question. We've done a whole video on that if you can go check it out. On Kingdom in Context, New Heaven, New Earth, I go over all the Greek in Revelation 21 and expound about the new piece of land. That's the new earth coming down. That's the kingdom of God. And then the new heaven it's technically, that word new in the Greek is refashioned. It's kainos, not neos. Neos is something never existed before, brand new. Kainos, something that has existed, but now it's been refashioned for another purpose. So that's the word used in Revelation 21, 1 through 3. A repurposed, refashioned firmament and a repurposed, refashioned earth coming down. That's the New Jerusalem. Used to be the paradise of God. Used to be the Garden of Eden. It's going to come down bigger, expanded as the New Jerusalem. There's a lot to it, guys. Unfortunately, there is things lost in translation that takes some digging, takes some effort, and to find out the origins of those words and what they mean. But once you do, the picture starts becoming really, really clear. As clear as the firmament. Thank you, Walking Truth. I appreciate, man. I appreciate your super chat so much. That's awesome, brother. Oh, okay. So 1 Million Likes is asking about what's my opinion on the East in the Bible, too away from God. Yeah, I don't know. I think the context would depend. I mean, if there's, just talking about which way they're traveling versus some sort of spiritual intonation as far as their heart. And I apologize. I don't have the best answer for you there, man. I don't have the best answer for that one. Okay. All right, guys. I don't see any more questions. Oh, thanks for the super chat. I can't. What does it say? The 𝐥𝐤? Yeah, thank you. You guys are awesome. I'm going to log out for tonight. We did a Q&A earlier. If you guys want to go check that out, my wife and I, one of our most recent live videos on the channel. If you haven't, if this was your only 2 hours, you get another hour and a half. You can watch us if you're bored tonight. But otherwise, I hope you guys have an enjoyable night. We appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for your support and your prayers. And we got good things happening. Like I said, more updates coming on the app. I'm trying to get a whole bunch of books finished for the study guide to try to come out this month. And yeah, just a lot of fun things in the works. You guys are amazing. 42 is coming. I know people are waiting on that, but this next episode is just as challenging and as large as all the other ones. And so I've been exceedingly busy with some other things, and I'm trying to get time to do it all, so I'm really praying that the Father helps us grow to a point where I can actually hire an assistant at some point. We can just helps me with a whole bunch of stuff that I need to do, and helps me so I can, because I have to like partial my time up during the day for creative versus administrative, and I still work 12 hours a day, and so yeah, there's just a lot going on. So thank you guys so much. Y'all are amazing. We'll see you next time.